Hi, I'm Patrick Manteiga. I'm the publisher of La Gaceta newspaper, and you're watching TBCN.
We're at the iconic Cuban Club in Ybor City with a century of culture, music, and yes, a few ghost stories. Together, we're going to raise the curtain on this historic Latin landmark. Hey there, this is Jimmy Flint-Smith with Hillsborough Heritage Explorations. Today we're going to be speaking with Patrick Manteiga, and he is the publisher of La Gaceta newspaper. Very interested to hear about the history that is attached to La Gaceta and as well as the Cuban Club. First off, thank you so much for being here today.
Appreciate the
I know you're
offer.
very busy. It seems like you're not just working one job, but two.
Yeah, one's a free job, but I'm very passionate about it.
Well, it pays dividends though, right? Okay, let's just get into it. We're going to start with Cuban Club, but I'd very much like to hear about your history with the newspaper as well.
Okay.
How did you get involved?
I got involved first when I was a teenager. I was invited by Budley, who was an artist at the time, photographer for National Geographic and Rolling Stones. And he was doing parties over at the Cuban Club, big arts parties over there. It was called the Artists and Writers Ball. And so I went over there and decorated it with him and a bunch of other artists. And they would have these big parties at the Cuban Clubs once a year. And they were always themed, and they would just decorate the whole building from top to bottom, even outside, with giant art sculptures and things like that. And so it was really cool. And then later on, my father helped found the foundation when the Cuban Club was having some tough economic times, and they were threatened with foreclosure. And so some people came to my father and to Ray Grimaldi and to Raul Levine and a few other people in the community, and they asked for help to raise $70,000 to pay off a mortgage. And so my father got on the phone, got a lot of people together. They raised the money to pay off the mortgage. And then they needed to have a better protection for the building. At the time, it was still offering health care. The Círculo Cubano was, which owned the building. And the fear was that through some lawsuit that asset could be taken away, the building. And so they formed the foundation, and then the Círculo Cubano stayed at the building, but the foundation owned the building, and it separated the asset from the liabilities. And so watching my father do it over the years, when he passed away, they asked me to serve on the board, and so I took his place on the foundation board.
Wow. So you've been part of the community for quite some time. It sounds like it takes a community.
Part of that for a long, long time. Yeah, the Cuban Club is it's a labor of love. It started off as a mutual aid society. During the war with Spain, there was a lot of groups here in Tampa that would raise money for guns and ammo to fight Spain in Cuba. And then after the war was won, those groups formed into the Cuban National Club. And then a few years afterwards, in 1902, they changed the name to Círculo Cubano de Tampa. And at that time, because of the pressures of Jim Crow, the club separated. It used to be before it was Afro-Cubans and white Cubans were in the same club. Afterwards, they had to separate, and you ended up with Martí Marcelo and Círculo Cubano. And so the Círculo Cubano started its first clubhouse in 1907, and that burned down. And in 1917, they built a building that is standing there today, a 4-story yellow brick building that's very beautiful and probably one of the most complicated and ornate in Ybor City.
Can you tell us about why that is?
Well, I mean, these were cathedrals to the working class. You know, you go into a lot of southern small towns and you see the church, and the church spire is the biggest thing in downtown. And Ybor, the clubs were. These were the cathedrals of the working man and woman. They were built to give social life to the cigar manufacturers, the cigar workers. These people would come from Cuba. They would work in the factories here, and it was pretty segregated back then. So if you were Latin, you didn't go to downtown. You had to kind of do your own thing. And in Tampa's first early days, it was not a great place to live. Dirt streets, mosquitoes, alligators, kind of like you know, where we put our immigrants today down in Everglades. And so a lot of them would just go back to Cuba. Havana was this great city. It's fantastic, arts, culture, and Tampa was nothing. And it was only a day trip back and forth between the two. In order to keep them here, they started the mutual aid societies, and so for a small amount of money, we would provide anybody who belonged to us with health care. So we would provide them with doctors, hospitalization. We provide them with a place to be buried. We would provide them with things to do. So you could go there to drink in the cantina. The Cuban Club originally had a basketball court, had 2 bowling lanes, had a swimming pool, had a theater. So we would do community theater. We'd also bring in people from upstate and bring them down here and have operas and things like that. We would have Sunday matinee dances for the young people. There was a barber shop. There was a library there. Billiards you could play. In the back we had boxing, so we would do boxing. And then all the clubs had intramural sports, so we would have a baseball team and other teams, and we'd compete against each other. And so outside of work, the Mutual Aid Society took care of the rest of your life. This helped cement and keep those workers here. And these buildings were pride of the community. And so they were ornate. They were our cathedrals. They were our churches in those days. If you notice, if you drive down 7th Avenue, you won't see those tall steeples. You won't even see a church on 7th Avenue because it really was a lot of these people when they got here from Italy, Sicily, Cuba, Spain, the church had been a little overpowering in some of these areas. And so when they came here, they wanted the church as part of their life, but not overridingly in their life. And so you saw kind of a stepping away, and religion put a little bit further in the back, and workers' rights and community seemed to go ahead of it.
It's so interesting that you essentially are describing a one-stop shop for basically anything and everything the community would need. So it's if you needed to, supplies or to meet something or just a place to drop off your kids for a few hours, seems kind of like all in one, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, it was the Deep South, and so while discrimination against Latins wasn't as strong as it was against African Americans, it was still there. And so you had to take care of your own, and that's why the Latins ended up with their own banks. They ended up with their own industries, with their own, like I said, recreational areas, their own restaurants, and so our community kind of took care of its own, and it was economically viable community. So the Anglos in Tampa had to deal with them because they brought a lot of money to the table. Our first industry was cigars. It was the largest industry at the state when it started. It was even bigger than phosphate. And so, when you think about it, at Tampa's peak, we had about 400 cigars producing 500 million hand-rolled cigars a year. That's a lot, and that's a lot of people employed, probably around 40,000 people employed in the industry.
We spoke to, I believe, a colleague, or at least a friend of yours, Drew Newman of J.C. Newman Cigars.
One of our first families of cigars here.
I know, so it's keeping the history alive right there. And I love that you both still work together. He mentioned something that I found interesting, since we're talking about the communities of the time. There was obviously organized crime. Was that something that affected like the Cuban Club or the people around that, or was it more mainly the cigars?
You call it organized crime, we call it the lottery. I mean, so back then it was bolita. It was illegal because the government wasn't doing it, and now they do the lottery, it's
Fair
legal.
enough.
So at the end of the day, bolita was a big game. They would do the numbers out of Cuba. Everybody would turn their radios on, and they would listen to the numbers being called down, and my father would say that when they were calling the numbers, you could walk down 7th Avenue and it would all be silent. Everybody's radios would be turned, listen to the numbers to see if they won. There was people who were involved in it who just went and they had their route. So they would go to different housewives and pick up the money and get their numbers. There was even games where people would, there was a list of things that you would dream about, and it would correspond to a number that you would play in the bolita and things like that. So, if you're talking about that kind of crime, it was kind of a community crime, but everybody did it, and like I said, today it's a lottery.
Okay.
If you're talking about some of the other types of crime, well, all of our communities have crimes. All of them have their issues. Prohibition certainly gave people an opportunity to make money off of illegal booze, and of course, in this area, I'm sure a lot of that came out of Cuba. Because the rum runners could come up in here pretty easily. And since we had clubs and nightclubs here, they all participate in it. there's a great story that involves the Cuban Club, and it involves our alley. Donna Perino told it. Her grandfather used to work as cleaning up the Cherokee Club, which is the building next to the Cuban Club, and it's where the El Pasaje Hotel was. And the feds raided it, and they went upstairs, and they opened up the windows, and they tossed all these bottles of Canadian Club out of the windows and onto the alley where all the bottles broke. And so her grandfather the next day went down there to go pick up the mess, and he found 6 bottles that hadn't broken. And these bottles were worth like, $10 a piece. And at that time, it was like a lot of money because this was good booze and there was no booze around. And so he sold them all, and then he passed them out to the whole family. So grandmother got some, grandfather. So the whole family benefited from the sale of this illicit liquor. So luckily, the bricks weren't too hard in the alley that day.
Hit it just on the, just the right way.
Just the right way.
That's pretty cool. What a treat for them. Can you tell us a little bit about, we're talking about the culture. What about the actual building of the Cuban Club? Who was responsible for that? Has it changed through the years?
Well, the original building burned down, and so they did a fundraising campaign. And so they wanted this building to look beautiful. I think it was a $70,000 cost was the first cost of it. And so they did, and so they brought in these great tiles. If you've ever been in the Cuban Club, the floor has these great tiles on it that have kind of a 3D image to them, and is shared in some of the other clubs. And then, of course, the theater's very beautiful, sits 425 people. The ballroom was all wood floors from edge to edge, and it had these windows that would open up that were almost like doors. And we had Juliet balconies, so if anybody fell out the window, they'd get caught by this iron railing out there and not fall all the way down the ground. And so you'd have this great breeze blowing through there. You'd have the grandmothers and the grandfathers lined up on the edge of the walls as these young girls would be approached by young men who would like to dance with them, and they'd get under the watchful eye of their grandparents. These dances would happen. It was a moment for a young Latin boy to be able to actually touch a young Latin girl as they're dancing and to get away with it. And so Sunday matinees were a great time and a great way to introduce your daughters and sons to other good Cubans. And of course, and the Italian Club was a way to introduce them to other good Italians. And then the Centro Storiano was ways to introduce them to other good Spaniards. And so all the clubs had their own ethnicity, and so forth. They also had their own jealousies, their own competitions against each other and things like that.
Sure.
So while they were all together, they all also had a little bit of competition on their side.
Interesting. It kept things alive, right?
It did. It certainly did. And so, and our bylaws, original bylaws are huge. And so you had different wings. And so you could just belong to the club, or you could belong to the club and the theater group. You could belong to the club and the theater group and the athletic group. You belong to the club and the theater group, and so on and so on, so that you could do more and more. It's like having a gym membership and upgrading it to different things.
That's clever.
So you could do a lot more with the club or a lot less with the club. The Cuban Club probably had a little bit rougher time than some of the others. When you got to Tampa from Sicily, going back wasn't much of an option. Very expensive, hard to do, long travel. Same thing with Spain. But like I said, Cuba was just a boat ride away, and it was a day travel down. Tampa's actually closer to Havana by boat than Miami is.
Really?
Yeah, because it's on this side of Cuba. It's on our side of Cuba. The problem is that if you had a strike in Tampa, a lot of the Cubans would just go back to Havana, and they'd work there for 2 or 3 years and maybe then come back. And so the Cuban population was very fluid back and forth.
A convenience factor.
Which would change the membership of the Cuban Club up and down as a roller coaster, whereas the Centro Español, the Italian Club, were a lot more steady in their membership. We would go up and down, and a lot of times was based on Cuba politics and Cuba's economy and the local economy. And so we could lose a lot of people, we'd gain a lot of people. And so when you gain a lot of people, a lot of times they needed aid. So they weren't coming here rich. And then, of course, when you lost them, you probably lost the people who were a little bit more wealthy, and so you lost them. And so, and then, of course, with the separation with the Cuban embargo, the Cubans who came here, they didn't really want to associate with the Cubans who had been part of the Cuban Club, because a lot of them had been fighting against Batista.
Mm-hmm.
And so that group started their own club, the Cuban Civic Club, which is out in Town and Country. And so while if you came here and you were Sicilian, you'd still join the Italian club. If you were, involved with the Spain, you'd still enjoy the Centro-Storiano. If you're Cuban, now you had two different clubs.
Ah.
In fact, we actually had three clubs because we had the Afro-Cubans in a separate club also. And so politics throughout the years have made the Cuban Club have a rough time in taking care of its own building. And so when I got on the board, the building was in pretty bad shape. The board before me, where my father had served, had tried to save the building, and it had, but they ended up incurring $1 million mortgage that we suffered with trying to pay every year. And so a few years ago, I asked if I could be permanently put on given a title of Director of Grants and Construction, so that we could have some continuity in raising money through grants, and some continuity because construction wasn't a one-time construction. It was like every year you're doing construction. Sure. And so since then, we've paid off our $1 million mortgage. We've probably secured about $5 million in grants. We currently have $2.5 million in grants that we're getting ready to spend on the building. And so we've made some serious structural repairs to it. We replaced 13 columns that were supporting the building. We've replaced some beams. We have just finished putting in all new windows in the building. We're getting ready we've got 6 more doors coming in, then all of our old doors will have been replaced. We've got new roofs on the building. So our next $2.5 million is to take any paint off of any brick that's been painted, and then to go and knock out any loose mortar between each and every brick and replace it with fresh mortar.
Is that a specific team, I guess like a historical preservation team?
You need specialists to do this, yeah. And so we've got, we've currently working on getting bids from 3 groups that all do this and do it very well, and see who we can work with best. And so we're going to try and make the building back to original, where there were 12 lamps, a lamp post on the building. We are going to remanufacture those and reinstall them. We did a renovation in the 50s that change some of the outside balustrades, and so we're going to try and go back to what looks original. We have to do it off of photographs, so we have to build things, look at them, see if they look like the photograph, and then adjust them. And so the Cuban Club is really going to look great. It already looks great, but it's going to look fantastic in another couple of years.
When does this when's this slated for?
I am waiting for bids as of this moment.
So as soon as possible.
Yeah, as soon as possible. And we're already doing some work with that, but the big pieces I've got to get some bids on. Yeah.
Can I ask you about just the interior? It's clearly a very large building, and how many ballrooms, event areas do you have?
We have about 36,000 square feet. The interior of the building, we can house about 2,000 people.
Okay.
Exterior, we can house about 4,000 people.
Okay.
So we have some big events there. Currently, we treat the building as an event center.
Sure.
So we make money with events that help us to pay for the construction. The foundation's board only goal is to redo the building.
Sure.
That's our only goal in life. And so any money that we get is used towards brick and mortar projects. And so currently we'll have concerts out there, EDM concerts, electronic dance music. We really will rent to anybody. We've everything from, churches on Sunday to burlesque shows. I mean,
sure.
So long as you don't burn down the building, we'll work with you on renting it.
I was going to ask about your clientele, but it sounds like anybody who wants to have a good time.
Anybody who wants to do something legal and we can figure out how we can make a little bit of money from it, we'll do it. WMNF has a Tropical Heat Wave there where they bring a bunch of bands in, and it's a great time. We have 13 Ugly Men do a large fundraiser there for a Halloween party. It's one of our largest events that we make money on, and we appreciate them holding that there every year. It draws about 2,000 people.
Sure.
We have markets there, flea markets there. Like I said, you name it, and I think we've had it. People like Elvis Costello have played there.
Really?
We've had 311s played there. We've had a lot of people play there.
It's so interesting, just the juxtaposition of you could have a church group come in one day and have like a very fancy dinner, and then you could have an EDM concert the next night, or a crazy Halloween party.
Yeah.
Do you have a special team that comes in and like makes up the place, or is it just kind of just make sure you clean up after you
So
leave
all
and
we
do
are
what
is
you
a
do?
rental. So we take care of making sure that there's hired security, making sure the bars work, cleaning up after the event, but we don't actually promote events. So somebody brings us an event, they can rent the building, and we take the alcohol sales. That's a major fundraiser for us, is alcohol sales. And so we're in the alcohol business.
You don't
also.
throw them
No, we don't
the
throw our
at the end of
liquor
the
out
night
anymore. No, no. And so, we're able now to pay the utilities, pay the insurance, put some money aside for construction. And so at the moment, the Cuban Club's in good place, as I think some of the rest of the clubs are. I think the Italian Club's doing a great job, such as Storiano. And all of us have had our hard times because, of course, you don't need a mutual aid society anymore. So people have had to kind of adjust and come other things.
But it's become part of the culture and the history, which I think people really get behind.
Yeah. And if we could and we can't get to the point, we try to give the building away to certain things that we feel are very cultural assets to our community and things like that. And so, we love to do that, and we have a great relationship with county government. We're even a storm shelter when hurricanes happen, or a distribution center, whatever they want. We have Tiger Bay there, which comes every month, and they televise that political discussion out of there. And so I think we're a good cultural asset. I think we're a convention center in Ybor City. So events there spread out to the community. We cause room nights to happen. We cause bars to be able to sell more, restaurants to be able to sell more. And so the money that the government invests in us, I think, is returned back in sales taxes and hotel bed tax.
So, I mean, you've talked a lot about how you, over the years, not just now, have contributed to the community in different ways. Moving forward, what's your vision as vice president, correct, of the club? What do you think is a great next step?
Well, our vision is to get this club completely done and share it with the community as much as possible.
Of course.
So whether that is allowing more tours in there, giving it away to people that we feel need a building to be able to have their event in, to still do paid events that bring in the money to be able to have staffing appropriately, and maybe to restart the club in a way so that people maybe in Ybor City can start to visit us a little bit more and have some perks that they can do at the building, maybe annual parties, cigar smokers, things like that.
Work with some of the other companies.
Yeah, and just to get more people in the building. It's a community treasure. We are not saving it for us. We're saving it for everybody else.
Of course.
If you're in Ybor, come up to the door. If it's open, walk in and look around, and look for events that are going to be happening at the Cuban Club. And if you've got a wedding that you want to do, come and see if we can rent it to you, whatever event that is.
Amazing.
So, no, it's very good, and it fits in very good with my current business, which I'm the publisher of La Gaceta, 103-year-old newspaper. My grandfather started the newspaper, and he was also a member of the Círculo Cubano. My father was publisher. He was also a member of Círculo Cubano, and same thing with myself now. And so, the newspapers over the years has written about these clubs, written about their entertainment, written about their ups and downs and the politics that affects them. So, the newspaper is still running in a very traditional way. We're really not online. If you find we do have a website, and you'll find some pieces of stories, but if you get to the bottom of it, it says, if you like this story, you want to read more, go buy a newspaper. And so we want to sell print and ink, and we enjoy doing it the old-fashioned way, and we do historical articles, and we run articles in Spanish language, Italian language, and the English language. And so we're the only trilingual newspaper in America that I know of. We are also the oldest Spanish language newspaper in America, and I think the second oldest minority-owned newspaper in America. I think there's a African-American newspaper in Philly that's a little bit older than we are. And so it's kind of neat to be around such things that are so old.
Absolutely. Classic, we'll call them, right?
The Cuban Club building was built in 1917, so we're what, 107?
Okay.
The Círculo Cubano, which is housed there, was started in 1902. And then La Gaceta, my newspaper, started in 1922.
1922. Okay. Like the Cuban Club, it
Mhm.
sounds like it's been contributing to the community for quite some time.
I think it's interesting how my newspaper started. So my grandfather came to Tampa in 1913
Sure.
aboard the steamer Olivet. There was two steamers that operated between here and Cuba, the Olivet and the Mascot. Looks like he traveled back and forth a couple times between Havana and Tampa. And he was offered a job at the Morgan Cigar Factory, which still stands today. It's part of, it's now St. Leo University on Howard Avenue.
Okay.
And so he was offered a job as a lector, which is a very prestigious job in those days. And so he took the steamer up, got to Port Tampa, which is south of Gandy, got on the streetcar there, took it up to Ybor City. That night he stayed at a boarding house above El Encanto Cleaners. That building is still there. The next day he went over to Morgan and started his job reading to workers. So he would sit in the rafters of the building on this perch, and he would read to them stories that they chose. So he would read news, and then he would read novels, and he would be programmed by the workers. And at the end of the week, they would they had a committee together that would collect all the money from all the workers, and then they would pay him at the end of the week. And then his next week would be meeting with the committee, and they would say, well, we want 2 hours of news, and we want this novel read to us, and we'd like an hour in the morning and then 2 hours of it in the afternoon. And so the lectors were very prominent. They were considered intellectuals of the community. And so if lectors ever gathered in a coffee shop and you have 3 or 4 of them talking to each other, you'd see a crowd kind of gather around them to hear their views of world politics and unionization and things going on in local politics. And so they were their community stars in the day, so much so even where my grandfather would be invited to different events, such as a new birth. They would invite the lecturer over to talk to the family and say hello, and they would go weddings, they would invite them. Of course, they would do the eulogies at funerals. And so they became part of the extended family of the community and trying to help them recognize important events.
That's incredible. Just to touch on that, I know you've worked with the cigar factories around here, obviously J.C. Newman, and you know, I'm sure you've covered quite a bit of that history through the years. What about the American Victory, for example? I know we've had an interview with them. Is with the Rough Riders, there's an incredible history. Is there anything that comes to mind that you guys?
You know, the interesting part about this is, you know, we call it the Spanish-American War.
Sure.
Well, if you go to Cuba, it's called the Cuban Spanish-American War because they were fighting a lot longer than we were, and it was actually about Cuba. And so it's very interesting because, of course, the Ybor community gave a lot to that. They would ship down arms. They would ship down money. They would be actually the Spanish-American War got its start with a note that was rolled in a cigar in West Tampa, and it was taken down to Cuba, and it was delivered to the group of guerrillas who then knew they could start the war because it was all coordinated. And so Tampa had a very intimate relationship with Cuba and its fight for freedom. Jose Marti, who led Cuba's revolt against Spain, came to Tampa over 20 times. And was inspired in Tampa by the unions here and the union organizers, and got some of his thoughts about how this war should be conducted and what Cuba freedom should look like while he was here in Tampa. And so the Rough Riders coming down here and things like that, while we know that is a significant part of this fight, it started a lot longer before they got here. And it really was Tampa's DNA and Ybor's DNA to fight for this Cuba freedom. And so the Rough Riders coming here was kind of an icing on the cake. Of course, they were stationed in camps around the Bay Area, and so they would ride into Ybor City a lot of times for entertainment, to eat, to drink, and things like that. And so there's signs in Ybor where you find the Rough Riders, you know, parked their horses here and you know, went off to different places. And so it's a great history, and the problem is a lot of people in Tampa don't know about it. You know, a lot of people are new here. And even if they've been here 10 or 20 years, they really haven't delved into what Tampa history is.
Well, I think that's what's so important about what you do at La Gaceta and with the Cuban Club furthermore, is that you keep that history alive so that people, new or old, locals or just visitors, get to learn a little something.
That's important what you guys are doing here. I mean, that's what we appreciate it through these other mediums. This story can be told and lives on, and hopefully people get curious and look a little bit deeper and go into the archives either at the University of South Florida, Tampa Public Library, or get a subscription to La Gaceta for $35 and it'll come mailed to you. In the U.S. Post Office, it goes through, and so it's the cheapest deal in town, $35 a year.
Hey, can't beat that. Well, look forward to getting my copy. Thank you, sir.